Chris Scalzo here with
Matt Howell.
On this episode of The First Run, Matt and I are going to discuss a pair of films about corruption. One potentially full of fun at a time in the not-so-long past, and the other being Wonder Woman 1984. Yep, our band marathon concludes with Salo, a film with one of the worst reputations, Matt, I think, ever. But does it live up to its infamy? There'll be a short review of the big releases on physical media as well, featuring your straight-to-DVD and streaming picks of the week. And then we'll close out the show with our band marathon, air quotes, awards, such as they are. So let's start everything off with a blast from the past with the continuing adventures. So it's a prequel, sequel? Anyway, here's Diana Prince and Friends.
Oh, God. You better be here with my money.
I'll have your money, Simon. Today I'm here for an apology.
Are you out of your mind? I'm not going to apologize.
I'm sorry. I messed up. I lied. And I'm sorry. You know, the truth is, I knew we were going to sink a long time ago. The wells were coming up dry. And no data suggested that was going to change. I should have folded then. But all the people that bought in, that believed in me. I wanted to do right.
Come on, Max. Look, you don't have
Simon,
to...
don't you understand that I wished for better? That with every ounce of my being, I wished that black gold would change the world for all of us. And I know you wish that too.
Of course I wish that too.
Then your wish is granted.
So, Matt, why don't you tell everybody, what is Wonder Woman 1984 all about? Then, of course, as always, I will have a follow-up question for you.
Boy, what is this film about? So, as Chris said, it's 60, 70 years later from the events of the first Wonder Woman. Diana Prince is working in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., where she comes across a stone that apparently has the ability to grant wishes, but it's kind of a monkey's paw price. She makes some wishes. Her coworker Kristen Wiig makes some wishes, and Pedro Pascal makes a big wish. And it's all about tying that off together after that.
There you go. And I think we talked about it when we did our makeshift horror anthology marathon, how much I love monkey's paws stories. So as this film was unfolding in front of me, I got very, very excited about that. I mean, we not only do we have that kind of trope, but we're also set in the 80s, right? It's a superhero film. It's DC. It's Wonder Woman. This thing, I'm going to be all in on this thing. But Matt, let me ask you. So Patty Jenkins' first film with Gal Gadot, the Wonder Woman, is a highlight, I think, of the DCEU, though it's maybe a little flawed, but still. Mm-hmm. How do we do with this second effort? Do we set a new tone and direction? Is this an improvement? Are we on the upward path here? What are your thoughts?
So I've been on record many times on this show, not that anybody pays any attention to me, that I didn't think that the first Wonder Woman was as great as a lot of the praise it got would suggest. Mm-hmm. I thought it was a good movie, and at the time, I thought it was the strongest entry in the DCEU. I think that it has been, at this point, I would say it's maybe third at this point, definitely second at the most. It had, and I thought it was more middle of the road than I think a lot of people were giving it credit for. Honestly, I think this is a step back. What level of fun there was in the first one is, I think, absent in this. The trailers kind of prepared me for something that it wasn't really what the end product wasn't what I was looking for. And I think there's a lot of weird story choices in this. A lot of weird dialogue. That it's not great, Chris. It's really not great. And I had high hopes for this.
Well, I don't. Okay, so let's break this down. So I think there are a couple issues for me with this film as well. I think it's a real swing and a miss on the 80s stuff here. Though It does a firm job establishing this time in the first 20 minutes or so, right? Mm-hmm. But then we almost kind of abandon it entirely. Because really what Patty Jenkins is trying to do with this film is tell a modern story about today, but send it into this hyper-stylized version of everything we're experiencing today back in the 80s, which is a rampant consumerism, the me generation, right? So she's trying kind of to make a commentary on a lot of the stuff we're experiencing today, but set it in this environment. Now, there's one key thing about this film. As I watched it, that was my light bulb moment. I did some research and turned out I was correct, which happens, as I'm sure you would guess, almost all the time. But for me, but I think it was a real miss without you incorporating more 80s music. It's a small critique, but for me, I think it's a bit, it matters because using, as you can hear my dog shake her collar, you really lose that feel, that 80s feel for this thing, right? So that's just the atmosphere, the soundscape, the landscape of everything we're seeing, the aesthetics. But I think one of the other major issues with the film is Diana is almost a second player, second fiddle in this film. The real focus for me tends to be Pedro Pascal's Maxwell Lord. Now, here's where I get torn because I love Pascal, right? I'm a big fan of his work, and he is, I'm going to give you a little hint of where I'm going. He is full Gene Hackman Lex Luthor in this film, right? And he is just chewing up the scenery, and he's a blast to watch. So that was, I think, was interesting and a smart decision. But what happens is by Jenkins setting her film, I know I'm throwing a lot at you at once. So let's stop with that. What are your thoughts about that? Give me some Pascal love or some Venom, and talk to me about that 80s setting.
Yeah, so the 80s setting is window dressing. They call the thing Wonder Woman 1984, with that, again, I'll go back to the trailer with that Blue Monday riff in there that I thought was just absolutely awesome. None of that is in here at all. The soundtrack is this. I wouldn't even call it a soundtrack because there isn't one. There's a score, and it's a particularly, I think, blasé score. I don't think it's particularly good at all. So that is a big miss for me. That took away a lot of the fun for me, but that's just because I'm an old man and I'm an 80s kid, and that's the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm getting Fidelity commercials blaring some fantastic 80s songs, some Roxy music, some what else are they using, right? I get in that kind of fan service just because I'm older and they want my money, but I can't get that in a Wonder Woman film set in the 80s.
Right, exactly. And then I guess by far Pedro Pascal is the best thing about this film. I agree with you. He's a lot of fun to watch. I mean, he goes over the top a lot in this, but it's never to the point that it's eye-rolling. It's all very kind of convincing comic book villain, like you said, Lex Luthor, Doctor Doom kind of postularizing kind of stuff. And let's admit, Gal Gadot is not the greatest of actresses. I mean, that's not something that's really going out on a limb. So I think she's asked to do a lot of heavy lifting in here, and she's very wooden. Whatever you think about Kristen Wiig's performance, I think she was much stronger, generally much more nuanced than as Cheetah than Gal Gadot is. And I thought Kristen Wiig was a lot more fun, was a lot more interesting of a character than Wonder Woman is. And it's a real problem when your superhero film that the thing is named after is like the third or fourth best player in the entire thing. I mean, even Chris Pine, as much as he's phoning it in for this thing, is still still more charm than Gal Gadot has on the screen.
That's a weird thing, too, because I think the two of them have really great chemistry. And if you want to see, I think it was an internet meme for a while after the first Wonder Woman film came out where they're doing interviews together. Yeah. And she's looking at him, and she kind of bites her lip, and then she realizes she's being recorded. Like, oh, that's right, I'm married, right? Type of thing. But you're right. I think she takes a step back as well from that first film. I think she's better in the first movie than she is here. But at heart, I get concerned that she's still the Gal Gadot from like that Fast and the Furious film where she is, I apologize, but she's dreadful in that thing. And she's better in BVS. She's solid in Wonder Woman, but this, you're right. It's just not as good. I'm not sure what the issue is with here, but I still think that the chemistry she has with Pine is very successful. The two of them work great together, and I love the juxtaposition of the fish out of water scenario. Right, first he's introducing her to modern times of the United States, or the Europe, and then she now introduces him to modern times in the 80s. And especially that montage of the dressing scene is probably one of the highlights, at least of the fun things in the film.
I agree. But I mean, what do you think? Okay, so performances aside, what do you think about the actual representation of Wonder Woman in this? Because I have a lot of problems with it personally. Again, I think it's a big step back from what we got in the first film.
What do you mean by that? Break that down.
So I think for one thing, for better or worse, there's no real heroic moment in this. There's no kind of going over the edge like there is in the first film, where she kind of goes into no man's land and has that kind of thrilling scene that everybody remembers. There's really not any of that. And a lot of this, I think I get where they were going with trying to show her as a conflicted character, but she kind of comes across in this as not only selfish in the sense that she makes her wish and she's not willing to give it up, but she's quick to kind of condemn everybody else's wish and wants them all to give it up kind of thing. And it seems Wonder Woman's supposed to be this kind of paragon, and I understand that, she's still in love with Chris Pine's character, fine, but it's been almost 100 years. Can you kind of like move on a little bit? It's not like the Wonder Woman that we saw in the first movie. It's not even the Wonder Woman we saw in the later movies. She's kind of this weird emo-y, like, it doesn't work for me, Wonder Woman, where her heroic tendencies and the kind of things that, she's supposed to represent are not there. Like, she's more focused on, I got what I want, I'm going to give it, but at the same time, I'm going to criticize Barbara for making her choices. And Barbara was a much more relatable character than I thought Wonder Woman was. And, you've seen the digital ink spilt on the kind of ethics of how they decided to fulfill Wonder Woman's wish. And I had that pause, although I'm not making as much of it as I think a lot of people are, but it's a valid criticism. It's kind of weird the way they kind of go about that instead of just bringing him back.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
No, you know what? You're right about that. So there's a weird thing, like, how do you measure consent if you're possessing the body of another man, right? So basically Chris Pine's soul in some, I guess, way just takes over this guy's body. So he still looks like this dude, which, if you're not familiar, if you watch any of the Hallmark movie of mysteries, he's in one of those series. I instantly knew who he was because of that, because of Mrs. First Run is a big fan of those. So, but yeah, you struggle with that. But I think the issue why I'm eventually able to dismiss it is I'm going to come back to what you're saying, is my core conceit of what's happening here is that Patty Jenkins is making a Richard Donner Superman film today. That's exactly what she's doing. And you can see it from the very beginning throughout this film, is she's making a fun, kind of goofy superhero film. They redesigned Wonder Woman's costume. It's much brighter now than the Zack Snyder version, which I think is the right decision. And I think she's trying to bring this lighter atmosphere to this series while also trying to tackle kind of these more difficult concepts. And she's somewhat successful on that and not quite successful on other things. So to get back to what you're saying about, I think part of the issue with Diana, she doesn't have this massive heroic moment like she does in the first film, is that in the end, her big superhero sacrifice is her renouncing her wish, which I think is done particularly well and has some real emotional resonance. But you're right, it doesn't have the big action set piece that first film does. And in fact, this film goes like an hour and 10 minutes between action moments, which is just crazy to me. And even then, the initial setup one is just okay, right? And then there's the one in the desert with some kind of dodgy effects, which is mostly interesting. And I think maybe Jenkins is also trying to illustrate that big moment by showing us the fact that she's losing her powers. So she's much more vulnerable in this film, so that it's a bigger sacrifice and risk for her to do so. So maybe that's what she's leaning on for that. But I think the big problem Jenkins has is where she set this film. She's handcuffed because she's making this between two existing films. We have the first Wonder Woman film, and then we have the established version of Wonder Woman for Batman versus Superman and then Justice League. So she can't develop that much because we have a locked-in endpoint, which is present day, right? So she's kind of stuck right now, and she can't have this kind of moment because we know in BVS she's still pining for Pine, right? So we have to Jenkins locks herself in a box where Diana basically can't have this massive development. Her character arc can't be that strong. And I think that's one of the limitations. Jenkins is more focused on telling this morality tale about greed and corruption, and then she basically, handcuffs herself because of it. So I think that's really the core of her problem in telling this story.
Yeah, I can see that. I think it's interesting, though, that you bring up that it is like a Donner film. Like, this is kind of like her take on Superman 2. And I think you're right. I think part of the other issue that there is with this film is that she tries to do too much. She's trying to give you this kind of greed and corruption, power corrupts kind of thing. I think it would have been a very interesting take if she had gone more into the Wonder Woman losing her powers thing. Maybe it would have been too on the nose of Superman 2, but there's no diner moment in this, and that I think would have been a much more interesting take where, Wonder Woman, who's always been this larger than life figure, even, a goddess among Amazons already, like she was the best of them, to be interested that like if she was just like a normal person, like what does that do to Wonder Woman? That's something that would be more interesting, I think, to explore than necessarily the Pine thing, or even, as much as I would hate to say it, the Pedro Pascal thing. It's almost like you want, like, maybe it would have been a better movie if it would have been Wonder Woman losing her powers because Cheetah got her powers, and maybe it would have been a more, I don't know, rote superhero film, but maybe it would have had more interesting things to say. I think you're right. I think she's trying to do a lot here, and I think she does herself a disservice in the sense that she can't focus appropriately on any one thing. There's a lot of threads that she could have taken more deeply to more interesting effect, I think, that because she's trying to do so many things, it kind of comes out a bit of a mess, in my opinion.
I think it is an overstuffed mess, but it's still a mess that I enjoyed. I had a lot of fun with it. I liked Pedro Pascal, as I said. I think you're right. Kristen Wiig is a lot of fun as well as Cheetah, and the interactions between Diana Prince. Though, I guess, again, Gadot gets lost in the shuffle in this film. I think she really does. But her and her time with Pine together is a lot of fun. Maybe we need to pepper in another action set piece somehow in between instead of going an hour and 10 plus minutes before something action-oriented happens. But I enjoyed this, Matt. A couple stray thoughts as well. As you said, Hans Zimmer provides the score for this film, and it's almost entirely absent of the big drums that he's been known for the past 10, 15 years. It's a subtler, quieter score from him that I think tries again to channel maybe a little John Williams in that Superman thing, though not as successfully. And they do intercut some stuff from the BVS score in here every now and then as well. But the problem is, by having her original theme be so big, this kind of scaled back version doesn't have the same heroic pop that I think it did in the other films, unfortunately. It's odd to have a muted score from Hans Zimmer. I think I have to listen to it one or two times and see how I feel about it in the end. And finally, I just want to curious for you, for people who have seen it. So I would say they announced it's going to make a third one. It made, over $27 million at the box office in theaters over the weekend, not counting HBO Max subscriptions. So they have greenlit a third entry with Patty and Gal. And who knows? I can't imagine you bring back Pine one more time. I think that's got it. We got to move on at that point. So are you excited for a third film? And then I want to hear your thoughts on the mid-credits tease.
So I'll start with the mid-credit tease first. I literally rolled my eyes at it. I'm like,
oh,
okay,
come on. It was great.
What purpose did that serve, kind of thing? Okay, great.
Setting up our third film, baby.
Yeah, sure. I honestly, I'm less excited about the third film now than I was probably before. Again, I hate always being right, Chris. I hate always being right. It's a burden for me. But when that second trailer came out, I was like, ooh, this is not looking as exciting as my excitement level went from here to like here.
Which is great for an audio medium. Thank you for that.
Well, it went from
really high.
real high to somewhere in the middle. Right. Somewhere in the middle. So I mean, you know what? And like I said before, I was more excited for this than I was for Black Widow. And then when those second trailers came out, they flip-flopped. I'm more excited for Black Widow now. I'm sorry. I think it's also really telling. It's interesting you bring up the HBO Max thing. I just want to point this out. HBO Max got the most downloads, I think, signups, which is like 500,000, I think, in like a weekend. Disney, when they released Soul, got 2.2 million new subscribers from watching Soul. So yeah, HBO Max still has a lot of catching up to do, and it'll be really interesting to see just what this even does to the rest of their slate. Yeah, I'm not super excited for Wonder Woman 3 at this point. I guess I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. We'll see what they can do. I mean, obviously, I'll still watch it. Even if I wasn't doing the show, I would still go see it.
Yeah.
But I think I'm gonna have to give Wonder Woman 1984 a C+. I think I gave the original a B-, and I think this is a weaker film. So I'm gonna be generous and give it a C+.
I'll have to check out what our scores were, and I appreciate everybody bearing with me as I tap my microphone again, like I do every week. So I was excited about the the mid-credits tease. I would love to see that individual show up in the third film. We won't spoil it, obviously, but I got a kick out of it. I was like, oh, check it out. I was all excited. So my wife was less than. She goes, oh, okay, that's interesting. She was more in your camp, I think, with that. Though she enjoyed the film. She gave it a B. I'm going to give it a B-, personally. I agree it's a step below the first film, but still entertaining as it is. So I guess that's that. 20 minutes on Wonder Woman 1984, folks.
It's the biggest film we've seen all year. It's like the tentpole film that we've seen this year.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah. And I want to say, too, I think part of the issue, not to make excuses for HBO Max, but if you have like an AT&T Unlimited plan, you have it free included, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering how many people, if that impacts those numbers. I don't know.
Yeah. Or if you were just an ordinary HBO subscriber, like on Xfinity or something, Comcast, then you get access to it as it is anyway. So you're right. It's probably a lot of people already have access to it, so they're not rushing out to get new subscribers.
Mm-hmm. Either way. All right. Wonder Woman 1984. Would love to hear your thoughts. Shoot us an email at feedback@thefirstrun.com. Coming up on physical media this upcoming Tuesday, January 5th. Happy New Year, folks. Let's hear what's coming out.
1, 2, 3, 4, and... Always count to 5.
Was that a samurai sword?
Why'd you fall into a sand gobbler's nest?
I didn't mean to. I was walking.
What's your name?
Joel Dawson.
I'm Clyde. This is Minnow.
You're lucky we weren't monsters. You were yelling like a girl. Oh, this is bad. This is so bad.
Okay, I don't sound like that. My voice is not that high-pitched.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is.
It was higher than mine, and I'm 8.
What in God's name are you doing up here alone, anyway?
I'm not alone. I've got Boy, too. Oh, wait, no! No, wait! Yeah.
Oh, my God, it's a puppy. Come here, boy. Come here, boy.
Hey, let's kill my dog.
Hi, boy. Hi.
So, what happened with your colony, man? They kick you out?
No, I actually left on my own. Something I had to do.
You stole food, didn't you?
He's a food stealer.
Yeah.
No, I didn't steal any food.
Right.
So, Matt, do you recognize that second voice there? That third voice, I should say? One of the best, one of my favorite B-movie actors? Or B...
I'm gonna go on a limb here. I really hope that I'm right. It's a Michael Rooker.
It is indeed. That's right. Dylan O'Brien, along with Michael Rooker, star in Love and Monsters, a film I've heard quite a lot about online. It's supposed to be a lot of fun, so we should probably tack it on the list at some point. Yep. Dylan O'Brien plays a young man who learns to survive a monster apocalypse with the help of an expert hunter. Includes some deleted scenes and a making of featurettes. A film that played locally here at the Green Light Cinema down in St. Pete. Independent theater, folks. Go check it out and support them, especially during this time. They're offering online screenings as well now, so you can support them. 12-hour shift. Bodies start to pile up when a drug user nurse and her cousin try to find a replacement kidney for an organ trafficker. It's supposed to be pretty crazy, and it might be a little fun to check out at some point. Yellow Rose. Rose, an undocumented 17-year-old Filipina, dreams of one day leaving her small Texas town to pursue her country music dreams. Her world is shattered when her mom suddenly gets picked up by immigration and customs enforcement. Rose, facing this new reality, is forced to flee the scene, leaving behind the only life she knows, and embark on a journey of self-discovery as she searches for a new home in the honky-tonk world of Austin, Texas. And Matt, your streaming pick of the week. That's right. That's now you do streaming. I'm going to go straight to DVD. I'm going to go with My Dad's Christmas Date. The only reason why I mention this film, because this is the only time I'll give this actor any promotion, is if it's in some schlocky straight-to-DVD pick, because I can't stand this guy. See if you can figure out who it is. Well, you won't be able to, but that's fine. In many ways, David and Jules Evans' relationship is no different from that of most fathers and 16-year-old daughters. He struggles to understand her. She refuses to communicate with him. He wants to be involved in her life. She wants her own space. And one important aspect, however, David and Jules are separated from the rest of society. The death of Jules' mom and David's wife in a car crash 2 years previous. With both struggling to cope with the rigors of daily life in the wake of this devastating loss, Jules decides to take matters into her own hands, Creating profiles for David on multiple online dating platforms, Jules sets out to find her dad a partner, and for herself, someone with whom she can talk. The question is, in the search for a new mom, will Jules find her old dad? Starring Jeremy Piven. I hate that.
Yeah, Jeremy Piven is somebody I can do without on most occasions.
What should we be streaming this New Year's weekend?
All right, so since everybody ran out to get their HBO Max subscriptions, I'm going to suggest watching a musical documentary on a band that was very divisive, especially when I was growing up. There's a documentary called How Can You Mend a Broken Heart, which is all about the Bee Gees, showing their kind of rise from the family band in Australia and England to what they ultimately became, plus the backlash and fall. It's interesting to see that kind of family, that dynamic between the three of them, plus their brother Andy Gibb, who had some hits in the 70s as well. I'm seeing kind of their massive success in the 70s, but it's also interesting to see their success as songwriters. They wrote a lot of songs that you may not realize that they wrote, that other singers made hits. So it was a fun, interesting little music documentary. So if you're into those kinds of things, that's worth a look.
I'm a massive Bee Gees fan, and I think that Barry Gibb writes some of the best pop music you will hear in your entire life. And you should definitely research all the songs that Barry Gibb wrote for other people. I actually have an iTunes. I have a playlist, Matt, of songs Barry wrote for other people. And also in the iTunes store, you can buy his versions of those songs. A lot of times they're demos, but you can hear his version of like stuff he wrote for Dolly Parton, stuff he wrote for Dionne Warwick, stuff he wrote for all of these musicians. So, yeah.
I know. That's really interesting. I would really be curious to hear his version of Islands in the Stream.
Yeah, so I'm a big Bee Gees Barry Gibb fan. So I keep hearing great things. I got to check that out. All right. It's time. I hope everybody, if you celebrate, had a great Christmas. Over the break, Matt and I watched Salo, or 120 Days of Sodom. I really couldn't think of a better way to close out the holiday. Let's take a listen.
Deboli creature incatenate, destinate al nostro piacere. Spero non vi siate illusi di trovare qui la ridicola libertà concessa dal mondo esterno. Siete fuori dai confini di ogni legalità. Nessuno sulla terra sa che voi siete qui. Per tutto quanto riguarda il mondo, voi siete già morti. Ed ecco le leggi che regoleranno qui dentro la vostra vita. Puntualmente alle 6 tutta la compagnia dovrà riunirsi nella sala detta delle orge, dove le narratrici a turno si siederanno a raccontare ognuna una serie di racconti su un tema particolare. Gli amici possono interrompere in qualunque punto e tutte le volte che lo vorranno. Questa narrazione ha l'obiettivo di infiammare l'immaginazione e ogni lascivia sarà permessa.
So what you just heard was our group of libertines explaining to the freshly collected, kidnapped youth exactly how things are going to shake out in this little mansion in southern Italy. So, Matt, basically, Salo, or 120 Days of Sodom, by Pier Paolo Pasolini. Pasolini is... All right, okay, I don't even know where to start with this. Okay. So, it is near the end of the fascist occupation of Italy. Mussolini is basically in charge of the north. And then the south, we have this group of governors. We have like a premier. We have a president. We have just basically the people in charge of southern Italy. And things are wrapping up in fascist Italy, thankfully. So these group of men go into this house. They kidnap these young people to then basically do with them what they will. And all manner of depraved acts that you can think of. And some, hopefully, you can't. So this is basically just under 2 hours of some of the most depraved acts you will see in a film. So I couldn't really, Matt, I can't think of a better way to close out this marathon than with Salo. I know Cannibal Holocaust was a really tough sit, but even with that, I was, as I said, I fast forwarded through the animal cruelty stuff. But out of all the films we watched, this is the only one that made me queasy. And I've seen it before. So I'm curious, Matt, your thoughts on Salo. Do you have a new favorite film?
This shot up to number one. I put it on my letterbox, 5-star film. Loved every second of it. What's interesting, so I know that this is based off of the subtitle, that this is based off of, very loosely, from what I understand, I've never actually read it, the 120 Days of Sodom by the Marquis de Sade, who was a French libertine nobleman who was arrested and put in prison several times for his filthy ideas of what was acceptable, and it generally speaking out against the government at the time. And he wrote this thing saying, basically coming up with the most disgusting things he could come up with. And it's where we get the term sadism, is from the Marquis. That should give you a good indication of what this is all about. As Chris said, this kind of is just like a continuing escalation of just almost all of the depraved acts that you could possibly see, from incest to rape to sadism, torture, corporophagia. I don't think there's any necrophilia in this, so that's something.
I was surprised by that too. If any film's really going to go home with that, you'd think it would be this.
No necrophilia, no pedophilia, so you're safe there. But basically everything else, and although a lot of the stuff though is told, not shown, there are some Italian prostitutes who are in their 50s and 60s. There's a lot of stories that they tell about some of the depraved acts that they've done with their customers and stuff throughout the years, especially when they were children. So the whole thing is they just try to think of everything shocking like the de Sade did and put it up there for your viewing, quote unquote, pleasure. What's interesting about this though is how detached it seems. This is a very, for better or worse, kind of art film kind of approach to this. And it's very unrealistic in the sense of how you would think anybody would really react in this situation. The villains, the four libertines, are these strange, almost gleeful psychotics, but they're so subdued in it. And they just almost seem like, I don't know what the word I'm looking for here is. They almost seem like they have no human emotion, right? And that's probably on purpose, but it doesn't seem like they're getting any gratification out of this. And it all seems very over the top, where at the same time, their victims, for the most part, they're almost blank slates throughout all of it. Even all the stuff that's happening to them, very rarely do they resist, very rarely do they cry out. Even when they're being abused, they don't give the kind of thing that you would expect to see in like torture porn that you see today, like you would see in a Hostel or a Saw or something like that. The human suffering is almost so far removed that it just becomes this weird, surreal exercise. And I feel like he's trying to make some kind of point here, maybe about fascism in general, but I don't know if I'm smart enough to get it, or maybe I don't have enough background to get it, but it was definitely an interesting film. I didn't find this as disturbing as I found some of our other films. And I think part of that is because despite everything that's happening here, there are stuff that's kind of implied. They don't explicitly show you a lot of things. They'll like take you right up to the edge and then they'll pull back, before it gets really gross. And, none of it's real. Whereas we can't say that on some of our films that we've seen so far, this thing. So that kind of undercuts it a little bit. I think at the end of the day, you still know this is still acting, and even the gore, some of it's better than others. Yeah, I don't know. It was weird. I don't know if I've become completely desensitized based on the other 4 films that we watched leading up to this kind of thing. I don't know. Thoughts?
That's interesting, because I actually had a different reaction from this, which I for me, this is like revisiting like Romper Room or Sesame Street. It's very tame and all. No, I'm kidding. I disagree with you on, which is interesting because you've never seen this before and I have. In fact, I owned this. I bought it on DVD probably 10 years ago when Criterion released that updated special edition version. And because I had heard about its reputation and you couldn't watch it any other way without buying it at that point. But no, I find this thing to be more upsetting now than it was for me when I first watched it. That was 10, 15 years ago. I feel it's this ruthless portrayal of evil and corruption, possibly the worst I've ever seen on screen, and maybe one of the most terrifying things in cinema, because I felt the authenticity of this, right? I felt that this is something that could and likely has happened. So I don't know if it's framed by, not to say things are that bad right now, but the current state of things and how really, to get to this point, certain people really just need a gentle push to really then just engage and just envelop themselves in all their worst impulses. And I want to get back to your point about the impact to the victims, because I think Pasolini even said basically that was on purpose, because he wanted these people basically to be portrayed as meat, that they're just cattle. They're there for the usage of these four people. That's why that happens the way it does. And I would push back on you saying that they got no enjoyment out of it. There are quite a few scenes with particularly the guy who played the president, who was probably the creepiest and most disturbing of the four of them, are laughing and smiling, and they're really enjoying it, particularly in our final chapter when we've gone from the sex to the ingestion of the...
I already said corpophagia, so people know what that means.
I'm sure.
Or they can look it up.
So that, and then finally the end of the torture.
Mm.
And that torture at the end, where they all take their turn in this seat with the binoculars watching these people being tortured to death. And this thing is exceptionally disturbing. It does, I think, fall under one of those things where I think if you're a fan of cinema and you like to be challenged, I think this is something you must see. You'll really never see it again. You'll have no urge to see it again. I probably wouldn't have if it wasn't for this marathon. It would just sit on my shelf and collect dust. Though now maybe it's out of print. Maybe I'll sell it and make some coin. Who knows? But it's an experience is really the best way to describe it. And it is disturbing. That scene I'm not as educated as you. Corporophagia, is that how you say it?
I think I'm not even sure I'm saying it right. It's like coprophagia, something like that. It's poop eating, folks. We've mentioned it several times.
Okay.
We brought this up with Divine, who really ate some poop. So there you go.
That's true. In this film, that didn't happen. Yeah. So it's just simulated, thankfully. But it is, that scene was, it made me like, I was like, oh God. Even though I'd seen it before and I knew it was coming again, it still hits me, just the smiles. I think that's probably for me the most haunting thing is these smiles and enjoyment by our four libertines, which is weird that you didn't have that same impact.
I mean, part of it, I was watching this thing and it's weird. So I'm watching the dubbed version of this thing, and the flatness of the way the dialogue comes out compared to some of the kind of passion that they show when they're like yelling and stuff didn't seem to match to me. And the president, who is creepy as hell, guys. He is creepy as hell, for better or worse. And honestly, I couldn't tell you who most of them were for the most part. The bearded guy was also very strange. But they were almost like sadistic Muppets. Like they had these weird kind of rictus smiles, and they were very blank all the time. And it reminded me, it almost had this kind of Lynchian surreality to it. And it made me able to kind of pull away from it. Like it was so over the top and so surreal that it kind of allowed me to stay removed from it. I didn't ever get invested into the kind of, more than on an intellectual level of what was going on screen. And part of that could be because I was having some problems. The version of this I watched, the sound didn't sync up quite right, and Chris was kind enough to send me a version that he had, but it was in Italian. I couldn't watch it. So so it was a challenge. I don't know. I hope that doesn't say anything weird about me, but for me, it just seemed, it was almost like, like I said, it was like almost watching something that you would, like an art piece that the shocking things are being presented on screen, but it's in such a detached and surrealistic, almost unrealistic way to some extent that it's almost like you're not feeling the kind of visceral impact of it, which I thought was an interesting choice. And maybe that's just me. Like I said, maybe I'm just dead inside. We've accused me of that several times, so we'll see.
I think that's the issue, is our four villains, our four libertines, they're portrayed that way for me on purpose. And that's what's so horrifying, is they are blank. They are dead inside. There's nothing inside them. There's no soul. There's no humanity. And that's what makes it so terrifying to me. And that's why it was so effective, because that exact reaction that you got from them, what your experience is what was so horrific for me, is that these men can just exist in this state to conduct these events and these horrible acts, and for them just to be like blank, except for the occasional moments of joy from their horrible indulgences. And the way that Pasolini portrays it, everything's very stark. There is a coldness to this film as well, right? That there's no emotion portrayed, but like I said, it's all on purpose. This was part of a planned trilogy that Pasolini wanted to make. The second film was it was a trilogy of death. It was going to be called. And the second film that I guess he had started to work on was going to be based on the child murderer Gali Dara. He was, I guess, another nobleman who was known as basically he was a serial killer of children.
Okay, all right.
But Pasolini was murdered. And the story of his death is highly contested as to who did it and why. Over the years, some guy confessed and then retracted his confession. It's a crazy story. Really, just as an artistic endeavor, this is a film to be reckoned with. But I can't recommend it to the general public. I can't do it. It is such an experience that you have to be a particular person in a particular state, I think, to watch this thing to be able to get through it. It is one of the most disturbing things I've seen in cinema. So in the end, Matt, I'm giving Salo an A. I am. It's just so effective and so exceptionally well done. We talk about art house horror with like the Ari Asters nowadays, right? And that whole group of people, your Robert Eggers. But this, I think, is like the pinnacle of all of that. And it's one of the most disturbing things you'll ever see. What are you giving Salo?
Yeah, I think I agree with you, because this thing accomplished what it set out to do so effectively, and just to show the kind of differing opinions, the different impacts it had just on the two of us. I think it is something, if you are like truly into film, like this is something that be worth watching at least once just to experience it. But I don't know, just like be prepared. Like I've heard of other films that, I have no interest of tracking down, but this was, as weird as it sounds to say, I'm glad that I watched this at least once. So I would give it an A as well, because I think it's incredibly effective at what it does.
Yeah, there's still some stuff I'm not going to watch, like the Serbian film. I'm never
right.
Gonna,
That's exactly what I was thinking of too. Never going to watch it. I have no desire.
Set Necromantic, another film with a notorious reputation. I have never seen. I don't think I ever will watch. But there is just something different about this one. Anyway. If you've seen Salo or 120 Days of Sodom, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Shoot us an email at feedback@thefirstrun.com. We hope you don't jettison the show, both of you that are listening, after maybe watching this, giving our recommendations and thinking, what is wrong with those two guys? But I think we've done enough. We've thrown out enough warnings about what you're going to watch. So
sure.
All right. Matt, let's bring it home. Let's go over. God, part of me is relieved that this marathon is over, and we'll be getting together in the next week to plan the next marathons for 2021. But this one was a marathon I will not soon forget. But
this was your idea too.
It was. It certainly was. Well, let's go ahead then and let's hand out some awards, shall we?
I'm on my way.
You sure are dressed up, Babs. You look real pretty.
Oh, thank you, Cotton. Why, a girl can never tell who she might run into when she's downtown. Why, I'm all dressed up and ready to fall in love.
I kind of wish I was going out, too, but I think Crackers is bringing his lady friend out here, and I don't want to miss that. It's usually a pretty good show.
Oh, I know. You can go into town next time I go. It's just those errands I have to run. Besides, you and Crackers will have a pretty good time right here. That little shed's just perfect.
I know it, Babs. It'll be the first time we've had anyone out here, and I can't wait to see how it works. I hope she doesn't give us any trouble.
Oh, I wouldn't worry about that. Crackers has a pretty good eye for what he likes. Just that little pair that I find a little something. Why, I haven't fallen in love for 3 whole days. I'm just itching to find somebody with a little imagination.
So, of course, that is Cotton and Babs, Divine herself, in Pink Flamingos.
Wow.
One of the jewels for me of this marathon. John Waters film. Anyway, all right, Matt. So here's what we agreed on to do. We're going to go best actor, best actress, director, picture, and then finally the most disturbing scene in this marathon. Does that work for you?
Yeah, that works for me.
All right, so I'll go first, Matt. Best actor?
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of crazy stuff in this marathon, but I think in the end, for me, the performance that I found the most interesting is the conflicted Christ of Willem Dafoe and Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ. As he's a normal guy trying to figure out what's happening. Is he the Son of God? Is he not? Does he succumb to these temptations brought forth to him by Satan? How does he interact? His interrelationships, I should say, with the disciples, who are basically, one of them's cool, though a little weird, and the rest of them just a bunch of, just cult member, slacker, wannabe follower guys, right? But in the end, yeah, I think Defoe's performance in that film is one of the more interesting things that Scorsese gives us. So that's what I went with. I went with Defoe as Jesus. What do you got?
Yeah, I think that's really the right answer here. I think Willem Dafoe as by far the strongest actor of anybody that we've seen, especially since a lot of the actors in this were amateurs at best. So, yeah, I think Defoe's portrayal of Christ or Jesus of Nazareth, is the most compelling. It's the most nuanced. So I think it's really the best answer for best actor.
There you go.
All right. Best actress, again, I think the pool is even smaller than it is for the best actor. So I'm going to have to go with Barbara Hershey in The Last Temptation, playing Mary Magdalene. Jesus's on again, off again love interest. I don't know necessarily if her performance is all-time great, but I think based off of what we had in this marathon, I think she's by far the best.
Yeah, I think that's a strong pick. I don't agree with it at all, actually.
All right.
I don't.
You don't agree with it at all?
Well, I do agree. You're that's fair. I think you're right about that. I think she is very good in this, but she's not the winner. I don't think at all. I was leaning towards Vanessa Redgrave and The Devils.
Really?
But in the end, woke Chris had to go with Divine from Pink Flamingos. I think that what she brings to that role as the Queen of Filth, and what she does with John Waters' script is just it's another level. I mean, her commitment in that role, particularly regarding what we had mentioned just a few minutes ago, is just otherworldly at times. And she is a spectacle that commands the screen. So this is the first thing when I was writing this out that popped in my head was going to be Divine as Babs and Pink Flamingo. I really can't, nothing else comes close to me at all.
Yeah, I thought about Divine, but at the end of the day, she's not a good actress. I mean, she may command the screen and she may have commitment to the role, but she is not a good actress. Man.
Presence.
So I can see where Chris is coming from. I think if you're sticking in the confines, as you just heard in that previous clip, of how good of an actress she is, I think she leaves a little bit to be desired. But to be fair, I did not enjoy that film anywhere near as much as Chris did. So.
That's true. That's very true. All right, Matt. So the best director in this series, I got to go Pasolini in Salo. I think the tale he's able to craft is just so disturbing, so stark, and so terrifying. How he's able to the message that he gets so clearly across, the story he's telling us. It's a visually stark, terrifying film, and it's going to sit with me for a very long time. And it was the most impactful thing I think we've watched this entire marathon. So I got to go with Pasolini.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Paolo Pasolini is my choice as well. I think by far, even though we had the great Martin Scorsese, in the first part of this marathon, I think Pasolini, what he's able to deliver, what his film looks like, is just head and shoulders the best thing that we saw for this marathon.
Then I guess that means your best picture is?
Salo as well. It's the only one I even gave it an A. The other ones, I mean, as strange as this may sound, I would almost consider watching it one more time in the manner in which it's supposed to be watched to get the full effect of this thing. So I think it's by far the best film. A tough film.
I agree. And though my favorite would probably be Pink Flamingos, the one I had the most fun with, maybe the highest rewatch value for me in a weird way. But I think in the end, the best thing we watched was indeed Salo. So since I kind of stole your thunder there, what is, Matt, then the most disturbing scene you saw?
So this kind of goes back and forth. There are several scenes that could be, and I think really it comes down to the scenes that are authentic. Those are the ones that are the toughest to watch. So obviously, Cannibal Holocaust had the kind of brutal killing of a turtle. I think for me, out of all of the animal deaths in that, I think the one that was the worst for me was when they killed the pig. But I keep going back to Divine eating that crap. And I just, the kind of reality of it, like when she picks it up and she looks at the camera like, I can't believe I'm going to do this. Just for a second, there's that flash of, I'm really going to do this. And she puts it in her mouth, and just to see the disgust just wash over her face, that it's just not fake in the slightest, it made my stomach turn. And it was by far the thing that affected me the most, was watching Divine eat crap in Pink Flamingos. So that's what I'm going to go with.
You know, that is a great pick. It's not mine, though it is a similar themed scene, which of course is, was it Girona della Merda? I know I'm massacring the Italian, but that is the scene we talked about in Salo, with the big plates full of poo that are passed around. I mean, it's so disturbing, where the president guy, right, he inspects the chamber pots to make sure no one's pooing, because they're supposed to poo in the particular area so they can collect it all for them all to consume. It is... even though it's, like you said, the Pink Flamingos one is actually real, but there's something still more disturbing for me about how they revel in it, and however it's just, even talking about it now is turning my stomach a bit. So that was easily the most disturbing scene for me out of the entire marathon. So let me close this out with one question for you. Was this a good idea?
I think it was. I think it was an interesting idea. I think it was... there's a lot of these films that I had never seen, with the exception of Cannibal Holocaust. I hadn't seen really any of the other ones, and I had heard a lot of things about it, and I'm glad that I expanded my cinematic horizons by watching these things, as much as I will probably never revisit any of them again.
Same. Very much the same. Though we've got to get you that cleaned up version of Salo somehow.
Yes.
So we'll see what we can do. See if I can burn my DVD. So we're family. That's fine. We can share things amongst each other.
That's true. Yeah, fair use. Fair use.
It's out of print too, right? So I'm not going to worry too much about it. All right. What do you think, folks? What were your favorite performances? Who delivered the best film? What was the scene that just is burned in the back of your retinas for the rest of your life? Shoot us an email at feedback@thefirstrun.com. Matt, next week, we're on board so far with Soul, the Pixar film, which is getting rave reviews, as well as Clooney's The Midnight Sky, currently on on Netflix. Soul, of course, is on Disney Plus. So, man, it's going to be quite the palate cleanser. And our top was it? We're not going to do. I'm not going to do. I don't think we should do our top 10 yet for 2020. I still want to squeeze some stuff in.
Yeah, there's a couple the week after. There's a couple films that have been getting a lot of buzz that I want to check out, and then I think you've been talking about it so much. Feel like I have to see Promising Young Woman at some point. So I guess I'm hoping it'll come on demand sometime in early January. Same thing with Nomadland. So there's still a couple more that I need to try and fit in to I feel like but we'll see. We'll see where we're at.
Yeah, that's the issue, right? So Nomadland was a film that didn't make my list of the ones that got away, because at the time it was still scheduled to come out in December. And then a few days after we recorded it, they pushed the release to February. So I think we're going to be out of luck on that one, basically.
Okay.
I don't think we should sit through February to do our list. I don't think so either. Yeah. So, but yeah, I want to see Sylvia's Love, which is on Prime. I want to see Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which is on Netflix. I am down to one film on Steve McQueen's Small Axe series on Prime. I've watched 4 of them so far. Each of them fantastic. So there is still a lot of stuff I want to try and catch up with. So we'll be doing that soon, folks. So bear with us. In the meantime, check us out on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and do a search for The First to Run. Scroll. Eventually you'll find us. Head on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a review. It'll help other people find the show, and we will, of course, read that review on the air. I hope everybody had a great holiday. Stay safe. Enjoy your New Year's. We will talk to you all soon. Take care.
Life is good, but it can be better.